All right, welcome everyone. This is the Learning Boost series, which is a UC San Diego virtual series of talks introducing you to leaders, dreamers, innovators, and change champions. The series is designed to inspire you with ideas that matter to you and your world, one talk at a time. Today's discussion is about transforming your team with your personal leadership philosophy. And our speaker today is Jay Pullins from Catapult Leadership Solutions. Thank you to those of you joining us live. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here with us. We invite you to add your questions and comments in the chat throughout the session. Jay will respond to questions throughout the presentation, and we will also have time for questions and answers towards the end of the presentation as well. If you're watching the recorded version on YouTube and want more content like this, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. And now I would like to introduce you to our featured speaker, Jay Pullins. Jay has been leading and developing leaders in a variety of settings for over 35 years. He has a diverse background as a leadership coach, military officer, an appointed state official, and executive leader of Alaska's largest church. As owner of Catapult Leadership Solutions and certified executive coach for Academy Leadership, Jay has trained over 1,400 leaders in the last 7 years from Alaska to Southern California in various fields from universities to military, construction, product distribution, manufacturing, telecommunications, churches, banks, a casino, and a railroad. He has participated with more than 13 UC San Diego departments and developed more than 700 employees since 2016. A 1989 graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, Jay led U.S. and multinational teams for the U.S. Air Force, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NORAD, and the Alaska National Guard. He led combat crews as an air battle manager in Operation Desert Storm, the conflicts in Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo, no-fly zones over Iraq, and counter-drug operations in Central and South America. Jay retired as an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel in 2011. Jay served as Chief of Staff to the Lieutenant Governor and then Special Assistant to the Governor of Alaska. He has a bachelor's degree in political science from the U.S. Air Force Academy and a master's degree in adult and higher education from the University of Oklahoma. Jay and his wife, Sonia, live in Anchorage, Alaska, and have 2 sons and 2 grandchildren. So with that, Jay, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. I'm really excited to get to connect with a lot of UCSD friends today. I'm very happy to be reaching out to you from Anchorage, Alaska, my home today. I've spent a lot of time down there on campus over the last few years and have a lot of great friends at UCSD and look forward to coming back and spending more time with some of you in person. I see a lot of familiar names on my screen and some familiar faces of some really fantastic leaders and some people I admire very much. So I'm very excited to get to spend this time connecting with you today. Like I said, I live in Anchorage, Alaska. Something that's kind of interesting about living up here is you might recall that yesterday was the summer solstice, which is what they call the longest day of the year, meaning the day of the year with the most daylight, the least darkness of the entire year. It's kind of a significant event up here in Alaska because the extreme northern latitude that we have here. We are south of the Arctic Circle, so we still do have some darkness in the evenings, but last night, I think the sunset, from sunset to sunrise, was just a little over 4 hours. As you might imagine, there's a lot of fun events on the summer solstice, all-night parties, and outdoor events where you stay up all night and watch the sunset and then watch it rise again. Anyway, it has really nothing to do with personal leadership philosophy, but I just thought that was interesting to share that with you. It's just kind of a fun thing that we get to experience here. What I'm going to do with you today for about the next 45 minutes is I want to give you a quick overview of something that my colleagues and I call a Leaders Compass workshop, which is typically about a 3-hour workshop spread out over two different sessions. We're going to kind of give you the tip of the iceberg today to kind of give you some things that might inspire you to think about your personal leadership philosophy and think about how you might be able to communicate that well and more effectively, and use that as a great communication tool on your leadership tool belt, if you will. I'd like to ask you a question as we're getting started, and this is a chance if you want to just drop your answer in the chat. I'm kind of looking at that too, so this might give me an idea of your present perspective. Just tell me real quickly: are you working full-time from home? Are you working full-time from the office, or are you hybrid? If you don't mind, just type in home, hybrid, or office in the chat. I just kind of like to see what we're looking at. Hybrid, home, full-time home, lots of hybrid, mostly home, full-time office. Yeah, quite a variety here. I see a lot of that hybrid. It's created some really interesting changes in our work lives, hasn't it? One of the biggest ones, I think, is around this area of communication for a lot of us, figuring out how to, particularly if you're a supervisor, or if you're a manager, if you're a leader, figuring out how to lead people in that hybrid environment through, well, sometimes we're meeting virtually, other times we're meeting, face to face, and sometimes it's, a lot of times it's some combination of both. It's sometimes difficult to remember who said who to what and what we communicated when and how we communicated it. And I find a lot of the feedback that I'm hearing is that there's some real challenges around that, aren't there? And so one of the things that we want to talk about is making sure that we're communicating clearly with our teams in ways that are really empowering to them and will really help them stay on point, stay on track, avoid getting discouraged and frustrated with these kinds of things. And so that's part of the benefit of this tool that we call a leadership, personal leadership philosophy. Okay, let me start with a question. How would you answer this question? You can put this in the chat too if you'd like. Who is the most important leader in your organization? I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer here, but the first thing that comes into your mind, what would you say? I see someone says all of us. Yeah, who would you say the CIO? That's interesting. Depends on the situation. Good. My immediate supervisor. All of us. Very good. Me. Good. Good. A lot of good thoughts. Let me ask the question a little bit differently and see if you'd answer it differently. To you personally, in your role, day to day, who's the most important leader to you? How would you answer that? Would you answer that any differently? My supervisor, depends, myself, me, yeah, good. Yeah, those are great answers. Let me ask you the question just a little bit differently again. Think about, for those of you who are supervisors, who are managers, think about your direct reports. Day to day, who is the most important leader in that organization to them? How would you answer that question? Supervisor, someone says. Okay, myself as a supervisor, me. Yeah, good thoughts, good thoughts. I want to make an argument to you today that sometimes we hear, well, it's got to be the chancellor, right? Or it's got to be, if it's another organization, it's got to be the CEO or whatever, because they're the big visionary. They're the one leading the whole organization. They're the ones with the real authority to set vision, those kinds of things. You hear those ideas quite a bit sometimes. I would say that's not a wrong answer, but I would say we're seeing particularly, I think it's always been true, but I think it's been more obvious in the last couple of years through COVID and all the changes that we've been through, is that often when we think about leadership, we're thinking less about the authority that someone has and really more about the influence that they have. More and more leadership is becoming about influence, personal influence that we have with people. When people are thinking about who their leader is, they're thinking about the person who they see sort of as their role model or as their go-to person. So I want to make an argument with you today and see if you'll go along with this, is that the idea that for your direct reports, for the people who report directly to you, the most important leader in all of UCSD is you. There's a couple of reasons why I believe that's true. One is we know that statistically, one of the number one reasons people quit their jobs is what? It's their direct supervisor, right? It's not the only reason, but it's always in the top five. Reasons why people quit their jobs is they just couldn't make it work with that supervisor. And so we recognize how that direct supervisor relationship is really, really important to just about all of us in our work lives. And secondly, on a day-to-day basis, the person that they go to for clarification, the person that they go through to for direction, for expectations, for those kinds of things, for problem solving, for top cover, all those kinds of ideas, is going to be you as their director, as their direct supervisor. Hopefully, that's the case. And so I want to make the argument to you that for those people who are the direct reports of everybody in the whole campus at UCSD, the most important leader to them is you, and that's important and that's very significant. And so, if that's true, then let me ask you another question. If the most important person in the organization to them is you, what are the things that those direct reports of yours want and deserve to know about you? Chew on that for a second, and if you have thoughts that come to mind, throw that in the chat for me too, and give me your thoughts on that. What are the things that they most want to know and deserve to know about you as their most influential leader? Any ideas? Yeah, your communication style, your expectations. Good, good. Yep. How do you measure success? That's interesting. That's really good. How many of you have been in this situation? If you want to use that wave feature or something like that on your screen, I'll be able to see that. How many of you have been in this situation where your supervisor is moving on? Maybe they got promoted, maybe they're retiring, whatever the scenario may be. And now you have a new supervisor who you didn't know before. Their first day as your new supervisor, you've never engaged with them. They're really just completely new to you. Okay, I see a few waves on there. Thumbs up. Yeah, when you're in that scenario, tell me what kind of questions. Maybe you're not actually asking these questions out loud, but you're thinking about these things. What kind of questions are you asking about that new leader? What are the things that you're wishing you knew about your new supervisor who you didn't know before? You can throw that in the chat too if you'd like, if you've got some ideas. Yeah, what's their communication style? What's the best way to communicate? That's a good one. Yeah. What else? Yeah, what's that person's expectations? And how are those expectations perhaps different than the expectations of my previous supervisor? So what kind of things am I going to need to change? How have priorities shifted? That's really good. Good. What's their background? That's a good one too. So we're kind of asking questions maybe about, wow, why did they get this job? Are they competent? Are they going to be successful, in leading me? Do they have the right, technical skills, perhaps those kinds of things? Did they come from some other area? Is this kind of work environment totally new to them? Or is this kind of the technical work that they're going to lead you in? What's their background in that? That's a great question too. What's the best way to develop a relationship with that person? That's a good one. Now, how many of you have been in this scenario? This is a little different, where you have a team of colleagues and your supervisor's position is vacant. Maybe you've even applied for that position. Maybe some of your colleagues, maybe some of your peers have applied for that position. And now someone who was your peer is now your new supervisor. How many of you have been in that scenario before? What kind of questions are you asking in that scenario about your new supervisor? Maybe you're not asking those out loud, but you're thinking of them. What kind of questions are you asking in that kind of scenario? Oh, I like this one. What are they most nervous about, and how can I support them? That's a great question. How can I support you in your new role? That's great. How will this relationship change? That's really good. That's really good. Maybe sometimes we're thinking, I know they were kind of friends with Bob now, but now they're the boss, and so what does that mean? Or maybe sometimes we're even thinking, I'm not sure as a peer, that person liked me very much. Now they're my boss, right? How's that going to play out? Maybe I'm a little nervous about that, right? Maybe I'm not really clear what their expectations are going to be like, right? Maybe I'm kind of wondering why them? Why did they get that promotion instead of me or instead of someone else, right? Those are all kinds of issues that are kind of running around in our heads. Um, Anytime we're getting a new supervisors, we've got to be having questions about what do the priorities look like and how are those maybe going to change. Will I like this new person? Will this new person like me? Are we going to just are we going to click? Are we just going to have a hard time understanding each other? What's their leadership style going to be like? What's their communication style going to be like? What are their expectations? What are their dislikes? What are their pet peeves, the things that rub them the wrong way, and how do I know what those things are? How do I know if I'm, doing something that's gonna be something they dislike? Um, been quite a bit of research done on this issue. Here's one of those, some research that's done on the sort of the top things that people ask about or want to know. Maybe they're not even having the opportunity to ask, but these are the things that they want to know about their new supervisor. Who is this person on a deep level, not just their name, but who are they? What do they stand for? What do they believe in? What are their values? Where do they want to take us? What do they want to change? Is there like a visionary kind of direction kind of thing? Or are we just gonna, what are they all about? Are they really in this for the organization? Are they going to care about me? Or is this just a stepping stone to them to something else? Those are all kinds of valid questions, right? What qualifies for them for that job? What makes them think they can do this? What makes them think they can handle me sometimes, right? What changes are they planning to make? Sometimes that's a big, scary one, right? And so these are really, really great questions that we need to recognize that when we are a supervisor, these are questions that people have about us. And oftentimes the reality is we think we've been clear about some of these things, but the reality is, and the research shows that none of us are ever as clear as we think we are. They say you need to communicate something like 7 times before people really start to sink in and they really begin to understand. They need to hear things different ways. And so, man, that's tiring for us sometimes as supervisors. And sometimes we get frustrated. Man, I know I told them that, right? And why don't they remember? Why don't they do the things I told them to do? Those kinds of things. Why does it seem to be these kinds of misunderstandings and miscommunication? Oftentimes it's because we haven't been nearly as clear as we think we have. And one of the problems is that for a lot of us, we're not even all that clear with ourselves. If I were to ask leaders questions, and I do ask them questions about, so tell me about your personal leadership philosophy. Tell me what that means to you. If I asked most leaders that question, and I do frequently, they'd think of something to tell me. They'd think of something that some slogan that they like and that they repeat. Something maybe they read in a leadership book that they really like, or something that their old boss used to say that really resonated with them. Oftentimes they'll tell me something like that. If I ask them the same question again 6 months later, 12 months later, they'd probably tell me something different. You know what I mean? Because they haven't really ever taken the time to been taken through a process where we're really thinking that out and thinking about what are my values? What are my operating principles? What are my expectations of the people who report to me, the people that I lead? And I haven't even really clearly articulated that to myself or written it down or really kind of done that kind of hard, rigid process of working through those kinds of things. So if I haven't done that for myself, certainly I'm not communicating that real effectively to my direct reports and to the people that I lead, particularly in this environment where it's just very hard to communicate with people about much of anything, in this hybrid environment where we're kind of bouncing back and forth and those kinds of things. And so the reason that we call, my colleagues and I call this process, this tool, we call it a leader's compass, is because first and foremost, before it's even helpful to anyone else, it's super helpful to me, just as a compass. In these days of GPS, we don't really use compasses that much anymore. But if you think about a GPS, up here in Alaska, we do a lot of backcountry hiking in the mountains, multi-day trips and things like that. And so you have course that's plotted out, but you've got this GPS that you're kind of paying attention to where you are, or we should be. Because if you get off track, get on the wrong trail or something like that, you could be in a lot of trouble out in an environment like that. And so you take along a GPS and you don't just shove it in your backpack and forget about it. You check it and you monitor it frequently so that if we have to make a course correction, it can be a minor course correction rather than a major course correction. And we don't let ourselves get too far off track. And so we can use this personal leadership philosophy, first of all, as a tool for myself, to keep myself on track and keep myself consistent with the things that I say I most value, the ways that I say that I operate. I can make sure that I'm being more clear with myself about my expectations of others, and so that I can begin to use that as a tool to communicate those things more effectively to the people around me. Secondly, we're not all that clear as we think we are when it comes to communicating with our employees. And oftentimes, in most cases, when you get a new supervisor, you spend the first 18 months just trying to figure them out. You know what I mean? You've probably experienced that, where they haven't really been very clear about what their expectations are or what priorities are, things like that. And so we try something. We try this out. Well, I guess I'll try it this way. And well, I guess that didn't go as well as I thought it would. I guess I'll try it a little different the next time. And we kind of play this game of trying to figure our bosses out most of the time. And they say for the average person, before they really start to click and really feel like they understand their supervisor, for most people that could take somewhere in the range of 18 months. I don't know about you and how often your supervisor changes, but I was in the Air Force where I was moving jobs every 3 years, and so was all the supervisors that I ever had. So I don't think I ever had a supervisor more than about 18 months. So it's just this ongoing game of trying to figure out the new person. You know what I mean? Which can lead to a lot of unfortunate consequences, a lot of misunderstandings, right? And so things don't get done right the first time when it doesn't have to be that way. So there's a lot of time that's wasted. There's a lot of loss of productivity. There's a lot of frustration on everyone's part. On the part of the supervisor, there can be a lot of frustration sometimes on the part of their direct reports too. But what if instead, say you get a new supervisor and within the first couple of weeks, they bring you in and they have a meeting. They set aside a good 45 minutes or an hour to sit down with you one-on-one. And what if they said to you, hey, I just want to take some time to walk you through who I am and tell you a little bit about my values, the things that are most important to me in this leadership role. I want to be clear with you about how I operate and do things, because you've had other supervisors who, I'm not saying their way is right or wrong, but it might be different than the way that I operate, the way I do things. I think it would help you if you understood sort of how I do business, if that makes sense. I want to tell you about what I think are the most important priorities for this office. What are the things that we really need to get right and that we need to prioritize, so that when everything can't be done right, these are the things that must be done right. Wouldn't that be helpful? What if they shared with you, also, I want to be clear about my expectations of my direct reports. I want to just be, clarify those kinds of things, how I want to communicate with you, what my expectations are of you, say outside of work time, those kinds of ideas. And I want to tell you a little bit about, here are the things that break trust with me. Here are the line crossers, in my opinion, the things that degrade trust between us, and things that I really, really don't want you to do. There are some other things that I wouldn't say are line crossers, but here's some things I want to communicate with you about, things that I just would like people to avoid, just because I find them unhelpful and unfruitful. And then there's some things even that I just want to share with you about me that are just kind of my idiosyncrasies, some things that would be helpful to know just to avoid misunderstandings. And what if I were able to do that, or your supervisor were able to do that with you in, say, one meeting in the first week or first couple of weeks that you're working together? Imagine how much more quickly you'd be up on point and moving in the right direction, moving confidently, doing the things that with a lot more confidence, because you've been told this is the right thing to do. These are the priorities. These are my expectations of you. These are the things not to do, the things to really avoid, think of how helpful that would be. Now imagine multiplying that by all the direct reports on your team that you work with. And now think of all of you on the same page because you've all heard the same message, and how much more effectively you'd work together communicating with each other, and pulling the rope in the same direction instead of pulling against each other because you heard different messages and the messaging was inconsistent. Now imagine if all the supervisors in your whole department had been through this process and had a personal leadership philosophy, and they were all communicating. And now I understand the difference between the different leaders that are influencers in our department, and I recognize how they're different, how their maybe expectations are different, and then I get some ideas about how to navigate all of that. Think about the additional productivity now that all the teams in my whole department are pulling in the same direction, and pulling in and working consistently together, because they've all heard the same kinds of messaging. Imagine the increased productivity and the lack of frustration, and the better communication, the better collaboration that could occur if that were the case. So that's my hope for you. And these are the things. There's some reasons why it's a great idea to develop a personal leadership philosophy. Here's a big one. Let me go to this next slide. I like to say it this way. I think about one of the most important things that we want to do as leaders is we want to provide clarity. Brene Brown, I think, says clarity, being clear is being kind, right? It's not being aggressive. It's not being forceful. Being clear is being kind. Because if we can create clarity about these kinds of things, like about our values, about our operating principles, about our priorities and our expectations, our non-negotiables, then what we can begin to do is we can create in the people that we lead, we can create in them confidence. Confidence in what? Confidence that I know what to do and I know what not to do. Confidence that I'm meeting the expectations, that I'm handling priorities correctly and in the way that my supervisor wants me to. That I'm supporting those values and those operating principles, and then I'm trying to align with those. And if I can have that kind of confidence, if my direct reports can have that kind of confidence, then they can start to function with a lot more courage to do the right things in the right situations when things are questionable. They can operate with more creativity when they have to figure things out. They know the parameters around that, so they can operate more creatively. And they can also function with a higher level of commitment to the team if they're confident about what they're doing. But the reality is, I don't think we can expect them to have that kind of function with that kind of courage, that kind of creativity, that kind of commitment if they don't have that kind of confidence, right? It's not fair to ask them to operate that way if they're not confident. And I don't think we can expect them to have that kind of confidence if we haven't given them that kind of clarity. So much of this begins with the clarity about those things. And having a tool to provide that kind of clarity and to communicate it consistently can be really, really important. Another thing that this does for us is it helps us to create a climate that's predictable. Being a predictable leader, creating a predictable environment can be really, really helpful. When we create predictability, then we can create stability. And when we can create stability in the work environment, then we begin to create credibility. Whereas if we give a different answer every time we're asked the same question, or if we're giving different people different answers and we're creating confusion, it degrades stability, but it also degrades our credibility, doesn't it? And when we're degrading our credibility, we're degrading trust. It's harder for people to have trust in us when they don't feel that we're credible because we're inconsistent and we haven't created an environment that's predictable and more stable. So having something like a personal leadership philosophy can help reduce that kind of confusion. It can help improve accountability too, because when we're confident that we've clearly communicated the same message consistently to our people, and we're confident that we've communicated it enough that we're confident that they know what our expectations are and those kinds of things, then we can begin to hold them accountable to those. But it's very hard to hold someone accountable to something if we're not confident that they really understand it. You know what I mean? That maybe we told them that once, or we think we did, or it's been a long time ago. So, if I don't have confidence that they really know, that it's very hard for me to be able to hold them accountable. And it's very hard as a team for us to hold each other accountable too, if the messaging has been inconsistent. So using a tool like this can improve our productivity as a team. Another thing that's helpful is it allows our those who work with us to know what to do when we're not there to ask, right? Because they have enough framework to know that maybe a new situation arises and I can't, I can't check in with my supervisor. I kind of know what to do. I have that kind of confidence, right? Um, Here's another thing that I think is helpful about this. Maybe you've seen this. Even if I disagree with some things that I might see in my leader's personal leadership philosophy, I'm a lot less stressed about it if I know what to expect. Maybe you've had this too. Uh, Karen, I see. Is there a question or something that I can clarify?
There is, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So the question
Yeah.
is, could you please repeat that really important point about creating predictability leads to stability, which leads to question mark?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, predictability leads to stability, and stability can lead to credibility, and credibility can lead to trust, right? Conversely, unpredictability can lead to instability, which degrades credibility and can degrade trust. Is that helpful? Good.
Thank you. Yes.
Right. Okay. Um, so I've had supervisors where if there were things about their leadership philosophy that it didn't excite me. Maybe I didn't really even agree with some elements of that, and that's okay, as long as I understand it. The thing that causes stress is not disagreeing with something, unless it's something really immoral or something like that, something that we really find offensive. In a lot of cases, they're like, "Yeah, boy, that is not my style. That is not the way I would communicate it if it was me," and that's okay, as long as I understand what that is, right? That understanding it can reduce stress, even if I disagree with it, right? So you'll find that to be true. The idea is not that we're trying to get everybody to agree with everything that we think, agree with all our values, like all of our expectations, things like that. That's not really the point. The point is to give them the stability so that they can function in that environment without stress, even when they disagree with us. Um, Another thing that this can be useful for is that sometimes it can help people decide if they're with you, right? Because there may be something about your personal leadership philosophy that may feel like a line crosser to them. And it wouldn't be helpful for them to know that so that they can make decisions accordingly in a healthy way, right? I've experienced that where, at one time I was hired into a role to lead an organization that was going to need some very major changes. And that wasn't just my opinion. It was the reason that I was hired to lead a particular organization was to change the direction of the organization. And as I worked to communicate that change to people in the organization, there were employees who'd been there for some time said, "I get it, but that's not what I signed up for." Right. And so we can have a constructive conversation about, well, let's find a way to get you in a place where that's a better fit for you. Maybe it's somewhere, in a different role, or maybe it's in a different organization, but we can have a constructive conversation about that because of the clarity that's in front of us. Right. When we don't have that kind of clarity and somebody really disagrees with something and they only kind of partially understand it, and they're not really sure if they're on board or not, then they're left with this passive aggressive option, right? Of kind of going along with the stuff that they think they understand and they think they like, but if there's something else that they're not sure about, they might drag their feet on that part, right? And so we wind up allowing this passive aggressive behavior to happen because we haven't been clear enough for them to make smart decisions uh, about their feedback and about their response to the things that we want to communicate clearly. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some things that we recommend we include in a personal leadership philosophy. Um, and one thing that I want to say about this is I don't want to sound dogmatic about this. I think one of the big principles when it comes to something like this is the best version of a tool like this is the one that you will actually use, right? So in order for you to actually use it, you're going to have to like it. It's going to have to be something that feels good to you. It feels like a tool that fits in your hand. You know what I mean? When you have good, if you're a tool person at all, you know, there's some tools that we don't use because we just and so we don't ever like using them because we haven't used them, right? And so we want to create something that first and foremost works with you. So I don't want you to hear me sound like I want to give you a list of sort of some best practices, I guess I would call this. Some things that I've seen after coaching literally hundreds of people through this process, some things that I've seen work really well. But I don't want you to feel like, well, that he's saying I have to do it that way, because I really don't want you to feel that. I want you to create something that's going to be a great tool for you personally. Okay. So having said that, we recommend that a great place to start with this process is to talk to your team and first discover for yourself, what are your core values? What are the most important core values to you personally? These are things that the values is a really big deal. We teach another course just about core values. But the big idea there is like, these are the things that if this was not a value here, I'm not sure I would stay, because it's that important to me, right? Maybe, an obvious one would be something like honesty. You know, if it was okay to be dishonest in this organization, I wouldn't stay here. It's that important to me. That's the level of importance when you think about values. Okay. Something that I think is helpful to think about when you're thinking about communicating your values is remember that these are your values. So you own those values. What I mean by that is sometimes when people draft their personal leadership philosophy and they share this section on their values, they'll say something like, so one of my top values is honesty. I want all of you to always be honest. And the listener is kind of going, what? Wait a minute, who are we talking about here? Because you said this was your value, but it sounds like this is something you're imposing on me. Okay, so I want you to be very clear that this is not a place to impose your values on someone else. This is a place for you to illuminate your people about your values that you own personally. With a group this size, if I checked in with you on all of your values, there'd be some variety there. There'd be a lot of similarity about some things, but there'd be some really unique things too, and that's okay. And so we're not asking everybody to agree with my values, right? I know I'm not trying to impose those on you. I'm trying to illuminate you about who I am. Is the idea there. So we recommend using I kinds of statements, first person kinds of statements. Make sure you're keeping it about you. There will be places in your personal leadership philosophy, like expectations, where you can talk about the things that you want from them. Okay, but this is not that place. This is the place where you're illuminating them about yourself. If you would, if something pops to mind, something about, oh yeah, this would be one of my core values for sure. Drop that in the chat for me too. Let me see what kind of the things are on your mind. What would be one of your most important values in your work life? Diversity, good. Empathy, ooh, fairness, yeah. A few more. Respect, empowerment, that's great. Integrity, awesome, really, really good. Compassion, that's great. Yeah, walking the talk, good. Credibility, accountability, good. Love those. One of the things that you'll find is that you might want to, for some of these, you might want to give a little definition to those as well, because sometimes some of those terms might mean different things to different people. So sometimes being prepared to provide a little definition around that can be helpful too. Something else that I think could be a helpful tip is you might think about what are those values that make me maybe a little unique to other people. I think everybody would probably say, I hope, that value or that honesty would be a value, or integrity, things like that. Who wouldn't say that, right? And it's not that not that that's, I mean, that's good, right? We want that to be the case. So, but think about what are the things that are values that maybe would be things that maybe set you apart a little bit from other leaders that that folks may have worked with in the past. That would be really, really helpful to know if I was your new employee. I'll give you maybe some examples. Generosity is one that if I showed you my personal leadership philosophy for my business, one of the generosity is a high value for me for my business, and so that's one of the things that I want to make sure that I communicate to colleagues and people that I work with. That kind of surprises people. Not one that you would be the first thing that pop in your mind. Empowerment is one that's important to me. Clarity, obviously, if I've said that word 100 times, right? So obviously that's an important value to me. Is clarity, team, those kinds of things. Flexibility, I like that one. Work-life balance, integrity sums up a collection of values. Teresa says, yeah, absolutely. Authenticity, very good. Empathy, yeah. Yeah, so that's the idea, okay? When it comes to your values, and remember to keep those things. Remember, you're talking about you, not something you're imposing on them. Okay, let's move down to another one. Let's talk about priorities. This is a very interesting one to me. I've seen people use this in some really effective ways, maybe in some less effective ways. I'll give you an example of one that I've seen was probably less effective. I had a great friend who was going through this course, and he was sharing his first draft of his personal leadership philosophy, and the group was doing a critique on that. And we came to his values section, and I think he said my values are God and country and family, or not values, my priorities are God, country, family, those kinds of things. And I thought to myself, that's great. Kind of sounds more like your values, right? But even more importantly, I'm not sure how useful that is to me to know those are your priorities. But here's maybe a really useful way to communicate something really valuable about priorities. I would ask this question: when all else fails, for your particular office, your particular department, what must not fail? What are the footballs that must not be fumbled? When everything can't be done right because we're just overwhelmed, or we're understaffed or whatever. When everything can't be done right, what are the things that must be? Wouldn't that be a helpful insight, particularly for someone who's new to the office, to recognize that, man, yeah, today's going to be a rough day. What are the things that must not fail, right? In some offices, the question feels more like a who question, or who are the constituents that we must not fail? Maybe you're a student-facing office. Maybe it's the students, right? Maybe if you're in a tech role, maybe it's those tech tickets that come in that keep the work moving. When we're fixing problems for people, maybe that's the most important priority. Maybe if you're in a dean's office or something like that, maybe taking care of the dean is job one. Tell me, in your role in your office, what would you say to a new employee is the thing that we must get right? Or what is that constituent that we must make our highest priority? Yes, you can't sacrifice quality for speed. Yeah, that's really true in a lot of environments. I know other environments where I know one in particular where recently in someone's philosophy, their direction was the speed is the need, because it's better to get things. We got to keep moving fast, even if it's B work instead of A work. But that's a different kind of role, and that's a different kind of office, and so important for somebody to recognize that that could be very appropriate in one setting, but now I'm in a different kind of setting, and so maybe those priorities are different. User-centered is a good one. High quality educational services. Okay. Oh, here's a good rule of thumb too. Have you ever heard someone say, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority, right? It's helpful for you to think about when I'm communicating, what are those tasks? What are those things that are the highest priority? It should exclude something else. Because if everything's priority, then really nothing's priority. And we got to, and that's not realistic. So what are the tasks or the constituents that take priority over other things that, sure, you want everything to be done great, but that's not always the reality and not always possible. So what are the things that must be? User feedback, user-centered. Yeah. Anybody else? Give me a couple more if you can. What are some specific tasks that are the most important things you want your people to be focused on? Relationship building. Ah, interesting. Good. Good. Assessing services and resources. Very good. Okay, great. Great, so we get the idea. There's a lot further that we could go. A lot more we could talk about, and I'm looking at the time going, well, I need to prioritize making some time for a little bit of question and answer. So I'm gonna stop there. Let me take you to something that might be helpful for you. There's a great place where you can find some sample leadership philosophies from real clients that we've had. And we've posted some of those online for you to take a look at some real world examples. It's academyleadership.com /leadership philosophy. It would be a helpful thing if this interests you to pursue this further. Also, you can learn more about this by taking a look at my website, which is catapultleadership.net. And here's my email address too, if you have questions about this or you'd like to reach out to me if you got questions. If you'd like to know more about our Leaders Compass workshop, where we go into depth and help people actually walk through this whole process, you can either email me or take a look at that website, or I'd be happy to interact with you about this going forward. But I think particularly those samples might be beneficial to you if this is something that interests you in pursuing further. Okay, with that, I should probably stop talking and open it up for some questions or thoughts or ideas. And Karen, maybe you can help me navigate that.
Absolutely. So are you okay with people taking themselves off mute to ask questions that way?
Sure.
So, so if you have questions or thoughts you'd like to share with Jay, please feel free to take yourself off mute, or you can raise your hand, or you can submit your questions through the chat. Give folks a moment to think about it. Okay, will we be sharing a copy of the presentation?
Oh, I can do that. Yeah, sure, we can do that. Should I send that to you, Karen?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, sure, it's a good idea.
All right, so one of the questions that came in is, what are some of the most detrimental things a leader can do and should be avoided?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of things that we do related to our communication and our communication style that can be destructive in our organization. One of the things, I'm just going to pick one that seems to be something that's that I'm seeing a lot lately, is this idea of being lazy in our communication. Of we tend to not be very robust about creating conversations where there's enough accountability in the conversation. There's a thing that we call an accountability conversation, where when we communicate with people, we want to make sure that, particularly when we're assigning tasks, that we're communicating and clear about who is going to do what specifically and by when, making sure there's deadlines included in that, making sure that both parties understand who exactly is going to do what exactly and by when exactly. And if we can't hold to that agreement, we're going to come clean about that early, right? And renegotiate that contract, renegotiate that who or that what or that when, rather than just let things slide. But if we're not robust in that kind of conversation, if we let people give us answers like, "Oh, I'll look into that," or or "I'll get back to you," or things like that, then we allow things to break down when we don't really need to. So there's one. I think another one that's been we've seen a lot of lately is using labels to label people. Is something that I find particularly hazardous, particularly unhelpful. when it comes to helping people, particularly around giving feedback or receiving feedback and things like that. Recognizing that people don't like being labeled. I know I don't, and people are a lot more complex than we give them credit for, and don't deserve those kinds of labels that come to mind often. So I find that to be a destructive behavior that is making it hard to follow leaders sometimes. Maybe that's a helpful answer.
Thank you, Jay. So we've had another question. One of the challenges with beginning leaders is that they are still learning how to lead and may want to allow space for change in priorities and values. What would you suggest for beginning leaders in the process of establishing their compass?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like that a lot. I think people respect it a lot when we just acknowledge that, hey, I'm new. I've been in that position. I'm new in this role. I'm new in this industry, perhaps. I may have a lot of leadership experience in some ways, but not in this realm. And so I want to, use a personal leadership philosophy to invite a lot of feedback and invite help. There are people out there that want to help you, right? But they need to know that you're soliciting that. So soliciting more feedback, soliciting more input, and just being, transparent and humble enough to say, I am under no illusion that I know everything about this role to be able to lead you perfectly in every way. And we need to work as a team, and I need to solicit your help in leading you. Help me help you, right? And let's help each other, and let's work together as a team. I think that's a great insight. Thanks for asking that question.
The next question is, how do you help leaders get to know their direct supports colleagues from a fresh perspective instead of just through the lens of the previous supervisor?
Let me noodle on that for a second, make sure I understand the question. How do you help leaders get to know their direct colleagues from a fresh perspective? So our peers, is that the idea?
Direct report.
Direct reports. How do if I'm understanding the question correctly, if I'm a supervisor, how do I get to know them? Is that the idea?
I
just want to make sure. Okay. Yeah. The reverse process can be true as well. Maybe the questions would look a little different, but we can invite that kind of relationship by just asking great questions of our direct reports, to maybe asking questions like, what are their values? What are their priorities in life? You know what I mean? Do they have families? Do they have family situations that would be helpful for me to know about, so that I could empathize with them in that, and I can help them navigate that effectively and see how their work life and their home life can work more effectively together. There questions like that might be really helpful if I can create an environment where they know that I'm interested, and I really want to know how to motivate them, how to leverage their skills. I really want to know what they want from this career. Are they looking for a career here? Is this what does this mean to them? And not judge them for that, and really help them help myself understand where they're coming from. If I'm understanding the question correctly, maybe that would be a helpful approach.
We'll see if there's any follow-up in the chat.
Okay.
Another question, how do you help influence leaders who are more focused on the black and white of job descriptions and job duties than the people side, relationship building that's so critical to getting through difficult times and moving the meter on turnover rates?
Well, one thing is when I recognize that personalities vary a lot. There's going to be a lot of diverse personalities that you're going to work with. And there are people who are just wired like I am to be people, and they get energized by that, engaging with people and that sort of thing. There are other people who are very much not that way. Now they can learn those kinds of skills and they can improve in those ways, but it's never going to come naturally for them. Okay, and that's not wrong. Uh, Sometimes having a mix of those kinds of people can be very, very helpful in an organization. And if we had all people in our group that were just people in all the time, maybe we wouldn't be nearly as productive. And so sometimes we need people who are less wired that way to help us stay focused, right? But recognize that we're all trying, right? Some of us just have, I when I think about my people battery, I walk around all day with a car-sized battery full of people energy. But there are people who have more like AAA batteries for their people energy, and they just get peopled out quick, right? And that's not wrong. It just makes them different. And I recognize that there are things that I can do to help them by trying to give them some space to recharge those people batteries sometimes, right? They can do the people thing, but in much smaller doses than maybe I can. And I recognize that that's not wrong. That's not a character flaw. It's just a matter of they're just designed differently than I am, right? So a lot of grace for that, a lot of respect for that, recognizing that they have other strengths in other ways that are going to be very helpful to the team. And so recognizing how to leverage those things and give grace, in maybe some areas where their strengths are different than mine.
I have a question about the predictability and stability that you spoke about a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Any suggestions or advice for navigating in an environment that maybe is experiencing a lot of change and a lot of instability and a lot of chaos almost, if you will,
Yeah.
and still as a supervisor having to, you may not be directly responsible for creating that, but you still have to deal with it nonetheless,
Right.
and not sort of push that down to the rest of your team.
Yeah.
Any suggestions or advice for dealing with chaos coming down from above?
Yeah. Well, yeah. For some places, you're just not going to be able to provide stability. It's just out of your control. It's very true. I would say one thing that is under your control, or more under your control, I might say, is relationship, right? And so if I can try to be consistent in when it comes to the relational elements of our team building and those kinds of things, if I can be consistent in my approach, if I can be consistent in how I lead and consistent in the way that I expect the team to relate to each other, the tasks may be changing and whirling around us all the time, and the technology is changing, and the rules oftentimes of how we're going to have to do things can change a lot. But there can be this framework of related to my expectations and our core values and our ground rules for how we work together as a team. Those things don't have to be changing all the time. We can provide some stability and consistency around some areas, and I think it's really important that that in those areas where we can, that we really try to.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, and there is one more in the chat at this point, so I'll pass that along. How do you balance the need for stability with the need for room to be creative and offer alternative ways of doing things?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's helpful for us to, as much as we can, to provide as much freedom and flexibility, particularly if we haven't learned anything over the last couple of years, it's how much we value our flexibility. And that's something that's important for us to communicate in our leadership philosophies as well, is how much flexibility are you as the boss willing to give? Because you've seen a wide variety on the spectrum of, some supervisors are much more controlling and, wanting you to, be accessible on Teams or chat or, whatever it is all the time. Other bosses certainly are not that case and really, give you a lot more freedom and flexibility to, perhaps, set your own hours that are more convenient with you depending on your work life. Others are not very open to those kinds of ideas and maybe more uncomfortable. So use a tool like a personal leadership philosophy to make sure your people understand which of those leaders you are. You see what I mean? Yeah, I mean, I love flexibility, but I work with a lot of people who are freaked out by the level of flexibility and the trust that I have sometimes in teams. You know what I mean? They're like, man, you're just going to get taken advantage of. Uh, so it's sure helpful to know whether, if you're a new employee, are you working for Jay or are you working for that other person? Right. So it's so important that we try to communicate those kinds of things. Is where exactly are you? What are your expectations outside of normal work hours? Are you a person who, if your boss, you shot someone an email on a weekend, would you expect them to see that, or would you expect them not to see that? Sure would be nice to know if I'm your new employee, which kind of those bosses I have, right? So the more clear you can be about all those kinds of things related to flexibility, would sure be helpful.
All right, well, that hour went quickly. We are out of time though. But again, thank you to Jay for taking the time to speak with us today. I for one, found it very informative and helpful, and I hope the rest of you did as well. Thank you all for joining us